Welcome back to Viking Guitar University. As always, I am your esteemed professor, Mr. Viking Guitar, and this video today is a direct continuation of the first guitar video. Now, I know that some of you are hungry and thirsty for knowledge, and that you can't be sated no matter how much is crammed down your throat. But lucky for you, that's just what we're here to do today. We've got 3 brand new exercises, and we're going to force them down your throat, and you're going to like it. Keep in mind, these exercises are meant to be practiced. They're not meant to just be run through and then however it turns out, move on to the next one. As I said in the first video, you get out a guitar what you put into it. So if you take these exercises, you take the time to actually practice them, start slow with them, work with them off and on until a point where they feel really solid. That's actually developing good guitar playing technique and not just trying to race through to the next one. There's no finish line, there's no goal. It's not about getting through one and moving on to the next lickety-split. It's about using them as exercises to develop your skills. So with that in mind, let's jump right into the first exercise. Exercise 1. Exercise 1 is primarily on the high E string. It's actually entirely on the high E string. But what I highly recommend is that once you start to get used to it, you switch it down to the B string, then the G, then the D, then the A, then the E, so that you're getting your hand used to practicing all the way across the fretboard, or across the strings. The other thing you could do is you could move it up and down the neck if you want to get used to the higher frets. As you might have noticed, the frets up here are much bigger than the frets down here. So it feels different when you're playing up here versus when you're playing all the way up here. But without further ado, let's get into what the actual riff is. Now you can download the tab and read along, or you can just watch me as I go over it. This riff starts with your hand situated between the 5th and 8th fret. You're going to start with your pinky. Now keep in mind, when we fret, we want to have the finger pressing down with the tip, not so much with the pad, but with the tip, and slid up pretty much right up to the next fret marker without actually sitting on top of the metal bit there. So we're going to start with our pinky to fret the 8th fret, then use our index finger to fret the 5th, our ring finger on the 7th, pinky on the 8th, ring on the 7th, and index back on the 5th. So the whole thing sounds like this. And what you want to do is repeat that 2 times. Keep in mind, when you're just starting out, focus more on getting good finger placement on the frets, making sure the notes ring out, making sure you're not bending the notes, because that's one thing you can do is you press down on it, you can accidentally bend it and that'll make it out of tune. Listen to the difference between this properly fretted note and this note that I'm cramming down on and bending out of tune. It sounds like a cat being ripped to shreds by, I don't know, a baboon or something. Regardless, it's not what you want your guitar to sound like. So when we start, focus on finger placement, proper picking, making sure you're picking the right string, that you're picking pretty much right when the finger needs to be, gets to where it needs to be, so you're not fretting and then looking around and then, okay, now pick it. That'll happen when you start, but you kind of want to work to not do that. So once again, we're going to do 2 repetitions of this riff. Pinky, index, ring, pinky, ring, index. 8, 5, 7, 8, 7, 5. Now this is a good riff because it works on isolating between the ring and the pinky, and that's something that's going to be a bane of your existence for as long as you play guitar, so you might as well get into it now. The problem with this riff is that it doesn't use the middle finger at all. I'm not going to show you the middle finger by itself because that's offensive, and I'm a classy dude. So we start with this riff. And then in order to incorporate the middle finger, we're going to slide it up and play a variation of it. Now this variation is going to be between the 7th and the 10th fret. It's going to start with the pinky on the 10th, then the index on the 7th, the middle on the 8th, the pinky on the 10th, the middle on the 8th, and then the index again on the 7th. So it's pinky, index, middle, pinky, middle, index, 10, 7, 8, 10, 8, 7. So there's 2 parts to the riff. The first part between 8 and 5, and the second part between 7 and 10. Both use your pinky, and both are going to separate between the pinky and the ring and the pinky and the middle finger. What I recommend is that you practice it in these 2 different parts, Get each part down by itself so that it feels good, and then work on actually doing the transfer across here, because that's probably where you're going to trip up if you're just getting started. So we're going to play through the first part a few times. I'm going to set a slow tempo and just play along with me. I'm tuned in E standard. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And now the second part between 7 and 10. 1, 2, 3, 4. Couple things to keep in mind. First off, we're doing all down picks for right now. Eventually we'll get to the point where we're alternate picking, which is going back and forth. But we're not doing that right now, even though I just did it. The other thing is that you really want to focus on using the tips of your fingers, and what that'll help with too is not having your fingers fly off into the outer space when you unfret. If you think about it, when you're fretting the guitar here, every time you take a finger off, especially the pinky, you want to keep it kind of close, because however far you go, that's how far you have to go back. It's really hard with the pinky because the tendency is to have it just fly out into nowhere and then have to travel all the way back, and that's not good. You want to really focus on this minimal movement here. If you watch some really fast guitarists, it looks like their hand isn't even, their fingers are all just staying stationary because they're just moving off so slightly. So instead of doing, it's a lot of wasted movement. It's there you go. So the whole riff, both parts, what you want to work up to, we're going to do this kind of at whatever speed we want, is like this. The reason I ended back on the 5th fret there is it's the root note of the whole riff. We'll get into root notes and scales and stuff later, but the point is it sounds pleasing and it sounds nice to resolve the phrase, to finish it back on that note. So download the tab, take that one, take as much time as you need, start slow, keep it even, make sure the notes are being fretted and picked properly, and when you're ready, we can move on to exercise 2. Exercise 2 is more complex. It's kind of a similar sort of idea, but what we're doing is we're going to be moving up and down the fretboard, and we're going to be working across a few different strings here. It's not overly complex, but it's something you might not want to jump into right away if exercise 1 is still giving you trouble. There's nothing wrong with that. Just keep working on exercise 1, and when you're ready, this one will be here for you. When you're learning how to play a riff, especially one like this where it's got a whole bunch of different parts, there's kind of 2 things that trip you up, or at least that trip me up. First off, there's the actual execution of it. What fingers am I doing? How am I picking it? Kind of developing the muscle memory for that. The second factor is just remembering all the different parts of the riff. You might be able to play each part fine, but as you're moving between them, you might have that momentary hesitation of, wait, what is this doing again? And that'll slow it down and make it sound a bit more amateurish. So just keep in mind, one of the nice advantages to taking it slow is that you're doing both things at once. You're developing the muscle memory and the picking patterns and the fretting patterns and all that, and you're also ingraining what the actual notes are and the way the riff sounds into your mind. So let's start on the second exercise right now. It's going to start on the 5th fret of the D string right here. And we're mainly going to be working with the D and the G string, though we are going to jump up to the B for a little bit at the end. So download the tab. The description for this video has the link to it. I will go over it note by note, but this is one that you'll probably benefit from more by just looking at the tab and figuring out how it sounds. Listen to how it sounds, and then we'll go through it part by part. I'm going to play it all the way through, and then we'll break it down. So, as you can see, It's moving all the way from the 5th up to the 12th fret. You even hit the 13th for a moment in there. You're doing the D, the G, and the B strings, and there's a lot going on, but it kind of follows a pattern that it repeats throughout. So let's break it down part by part. And just like the other riff, you probably want to take it one part at a time, practice that until it feels good, then go to the next one, practice that till it feels good, go to the third one and keep doing it, then tie them all together. The first part of exercise 2 here starts at the 5th fret on the D string, and we're using our index finger for the 5th fret, our ring finger for the 7th fret on the G string, our index finger again for the 5th fret on the G string, and then our pinky down here for the 8th fret on the D string. Now with this riff, actually with all of them, I tend to prefer this hand position where my thumb is braced against the back of the guitar neck, and then I have more reach here, both lengthwise up and down the neck as well as across the fretboard like this. So I recommend using that, especially because you're going to be reaching your pinky all the way across here to the D string on the 8th fret. And that's a big stretch if you're just getting used to it. The guitar still feels awkward and it's strange. So once again, it's... And then we're going back, index finger, 5th fret on the G, ring finger 7 on the G, index 5th on the G, and then pinky again, 8th on the D. So the whole thing is... Let's just cycle through that a couple times. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's move on to the second part. Keep in mind, if you look at the tabs, this might make it a bit easier. It's going to be 7th fret on the D string. We're going to start index finger 7, then use our middle finger up at the 8th fret on the G string, index 7 on the G string, pinky 10th on the D string, then back up to the 7th on the G with the index, middle on the 8th on the G, 7th, index, G, pinky 10th, D. So it's... So if we play the first two parts together, slow, it's like this. Another thing to keep in mind with this is that as you're playing across multiple strings, one problem you might have is the other string ringing out when you're playing the new one, like... That's not something you want to do. We're going to work more on muting later, but just keep in mind that basically what you're doing is just placing your right hand down here in a way that you're muting whatever strings you're not playing. You can also use your fingers here to mute it. Like, as I'm playing, I'm using this index finger here to kind of mute these upper strings so they're not just ringing out. You don't want that. So, kind of just use both hands. You'll start to develop a sense for it. It's the easiest way I can say it. But for right now, let's just focus on the riff. The third part is going to move up again. We're going to be starting on the 8th fret index finger, the 10th on the G string with our ring, the 8th on the G with our index, and then this is a stretch. You're going to reach all the way over to the 12th fret on the D string with your pinky, back up to the 8th on the G string with your index, ring finger 10th on the G, index again on the 8th on the G, and then again with the pinky all the way down here to the 12th fret on the D. Now this is where it really benefits that you have your hand position with this thumb against the back instead of C-clamping it like this. You can do it that way, but it's this much more awkward stretch with the pinky. So this part, once again, is... So the whole thing up to that point is... thing about this is even though your hand's moving up across, you can kind of do it just as that new part comes. You don't need to be moving it all the time. Each riff or each part of it is kind of its own contained thing, and then you can just move up when it's time to change. You're not moving throughout the riff so much as just in these few segmented parts. The last part is going to start up here on the 10th fret on the D string. We're going to use our index finger, 10th fret D, middle finger, 12th fret G, index, 10th fret G, pinky, 13th D, then index, 10th fret G, ring, 12th fret G. And now here's where it gets crazy. We're going to play on the B string. We're going to use our middle finger for the 11th fret on the B string, then our index for the 10th on the B string, and then back to the 12th fret on the G string with our ring finger. So played slow, this last segment of the riff is. So let's play that through a few times, slow pace. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's put the whole thing together. Remember, with this one, it's important to really focus on breaking it down part by part and then put it together. Start slow, proper finger placement, make sure the notes ring out, you're picking properly. We're doing all down picks for right now. Practice each part separately, and then we're going to tie it all together. So now that you got that, we're going to reward you with the simple one and an informative one in Exercise 3. Exercise 3 here is probably going to be a little bit easier. We are working across all 6 strings, so that might be kind of new to you, but there's a whole lot less going on with the left hand. You're not moving all over the place, so we'll finish out with this one. The other nice thing about this is that this is a scale. Now, if you hear that and you're like, oh no, scales, don't worry, you don't have to think about it. I'm just showing you this right now, so it's kind of in your head for later when we talk about this. If you're interested, this is called an A minor pentatonic scale. If you're not interested, don't worry. Just play what I play. Once again, download the tabs. You can follow along there, and I'll explain it right here. We're going to start with our index finger on the 6th string, 5th fret. Then we're going to use our pinky to hit the 8th fret, same string. We're going to go up to the next string, use our index on the 5th, and our ring on the 7th. Up to the next string with our index on the 5th, and then our ring on the 7th. Now that's the first half of it. So once again, it's going to be 5 on the E, 8 on the E, 5 on the A, 7 on the A, 5 on the D, 7 on the D. Second part, starting on the G string, 5th fret, 7th fret G, index for the 5th on the B, pinky for the 8th on the B, index for the 5th on the E, pinky for the 8th on the E. So the second part is 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. So the whole thing all the way through with a slow pace, 1, 2, 3, 4. One thing you can also do if you like this, and you should, because it's the basis of a lot of Western music, and if you listen to Western music, I know you've heard this before, and thus you must like it, is to play it backwards. So let's start 8 on the high E, and we'll just walk it back down. So those are the supplemental exercises to Guitar Video 1. Go through them, take them at your own pace, make sure you actually learn them instead of just running through them. And then next time we can get into some newer stuff and then have more exercises and continue your path of guitar enlightenment. Until next time, I'm Viking Guitar, this is Viking Guitar University, and keep the world metal.